What happens when a man who has everything makes the worst choice imaginable? He was a king on Wall Street with a beautiful, intelligent wife carrying his first child. But he threw it all away for a younger, more ambitious mistress. He thought he could discard his family and still control the outcome using his power and money to claim his son. But he never foresaw the judge's final shocking verdict, a decision that would not only strip him of his child, but hand the baby his legacy directly to the one man in the world he despised most, his wealthiest and most powerful rival. This is the story of how a mother's love, an enemy's honor, and a judge's gavel brought about the most stunning reversal of fortune imaginable. The air in the penthouse on Central Park West was always the perfect temperature, a crisp, climate-controlled 72 degrees that defied the sweltering New York summers and bitter winters. Amelia Sterling thought of it as the air of wealth, filtered, sterile, and unchanging. For 5 years, this had been her life with Ethan Vance. Their marriage was to the outside world as flawless as the panoramic view from their floor-to-ceiling windows. Ethan was a titan in private equity, a shark in a Tom Ford suit, whose name was whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in boardrooms across the city. Amelia, a talented architect, whose career had been lovingly paused to support his, was the perfect accessory, elegant, intelligent, and impeccably dressed. Their life was a meticulously curated collection of society galas, Hamptons weekends, and dinners at restaurants where reservations were a form of currency. But lately the gilded cage had begun to feel more like a prison. The silence in their sprawling apartment had grown heavy, filled with the unspoken words that hung between them. Ethan was more distant than ever, his phone a permanent extension of his hand, his thumb endlessly scrolling through messages that made him smirk in a way he never smirked at her. "Just work, darling," he'd say the words smooth and practiced. "Closing the Kensington deal." Amelia knew better. She saw the receipts for hotel rooms she'd never stayed in the scent of a strange, cloyingly sweet perfume on his shirts, the late-night board meetings that left him looking smugly satisfied rather than exhausted. She had ignored it, telling herself it was a phase, a symptom of the high-pressure world he inhabited. Then came the news that changed everything. 2 blue lines on a plastic stick. A baby. Their baby. She imagined this would be the anchor to bring him back, the miracle that would mend the growing fractures in their perfect facade. She waited for him to come home, rehearsing the words, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. When he finally walked in, loosening his silk tie, she couldn't wait any longer. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. "We're pregnant." The reaction she had dreamed of him lifting her up, of tears and laughter and promises of a new beginning, never came. He simply froze, his handsome face hardening into an unreadable mask. He looked not at her, but through her, his mind clearly miles away calculating. "Okay," was all he said. Not we, just okay. In that single cold word, Amelia felt the floor drop out from under her. The next few weeks were a blur of forced smiles and hollow conversations. He was physically present, but emotionally vacant. He accompanied her to one ultrasound, where he stared at the grainy image of their son on the screen with the detached interest of a man viewing a stock ticker. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday. Ethan was in the shower when his phone left carelessly on the bedside table, lit up with a name Amelia had seen before on credit card statements: Chloe Decker. A notification popped up, a preview of the message beneath the name. "Did you tell the Ice Queen about us yet? Can't wait to have you all to myself. Your son deserves a mother who actually excites you. XOXO." The air left Amelia's lungs in a painful rush. The Ice Queen. Your son. The casual cruelty of it, the calculated possession, was like a physical blow. The filtered 72-degree air suddenly felt suffocating. She grabbed the phone, her hands shaking, and scrolled. It was all there. A sordid year-long affair laid bare in explicit texts, photos, at lavish resorts, promises of a future that had no place for her. Chloe Decker was a junior analyst at his firm, a 25-year-old with sharp ambition and a ruthless understanding of what men like Ethan wanted, not a partner, but a prize. When Ethan emerged from the bathroom, a towel slung low on his hips, he saw the phone in her hand and the devastation on her face. For the first time in months, his mask of indifference slipped, replaced not with remorse, but with annoyance. "You shouldn't have done that, Amelia," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "She thinks you're going to leave me for her." Amelia whispered the words, tasting like ash. "She's talking about raising our son?" Ethan didn't deny it. He simply crossed his arms, a sigh of impatience escaping his lips. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" Her voice rose, cracking with disbelief. "I am carrying your child, Ethan. We built a life together. You made vows to me." "And I'm offering you a generous way out of it," he retorted, the cold businessman emerging. "I'll set you up in a condo, a severance package, if you will. You won't have to worry about money." He was firing her from their marriage. The realization was so grotesque it was almost surreal. He saw her and their unborn child as a line item on a balance sheet, a problem to be managed with a payout. "And our son?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He finally looked at her, then a flicker of something possessive in his eyes. "He's a Vance. He'll be with me. Chloe is wonderful. She'll be a fantastic stepmother." In that moment, Amelia Sterling, the poised wife of Ethan Vance, ceased to exist. In her place was a mother, and a primal, ferocious instinct took root in her heart. He was not just leaving her, he was trying to steal her child. He had mistaken her quiet dignity for weakness. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. "Get out," she said, her voice low and shaking with a rage she didn't know she possessed. He laughed, a short, humorless bark. "My dear, this is my apartment. You're the one who will be leaving." He turned his back on her, dismissing her, and began to get dressed. He chose a crisp shirt designer cufflinks and slipped on his Patek Philippe watch. As he straightened his tie in the mirror, looking at his own reflection with smug satisfaction, he didn't see the woman behind him gathering the shards of her broken heart and forging them into a weapon. The war had just begun. The eviction from her own life was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, Ethan's lawyers had sent a formal notice. She was permitted to collect her personal belongings under the supervision of a stone-faced assistant who checked off items on a clipboard. The doormen who had greeted her by name for 5 years now averted their eyes, their loyalty bought and paid for by the man who signed their checks. The gilded cage had slammed shut behind her, and she was out on the streets of New York, 5 months pregnant, and utterly alone. Her severance package was an insult disguised as generosity, a check that wouldn't cover 6 months of Manhattan rent, and the keys to a sterile corporate apartment in a soulless part of Midtown. Ethan had calculated it perfectly enough to prevent her from claiming destitution, but not enough for her to mount a real fight. He underestimated her. Amelia didn't cash the check. Instead, she called the one person from her past she knew she could trust, her old college roommate, Evelyn Reed, now a partner at one of the city's most tenacious family law firms. Evelyn's office was the antithesis of Amelia's former life. It was cluttered, chaotic, and smelled of strong coffee and determination. Evelyn herself was a whirlwind of sharp intelligence, her dark hair pulled into a severe bun as if to contain her formidable energy. So the golden boy finally showed his true colors. Evelyn said, her expression grim, as Amelia recounted the story, her voice breaking only once. "I never liked him, Amy. He always looked at you like an acquisition." Amelia flinched, the truth of the statement hitting her harder than any insult. "He wants the baby Ev. He and that woman. They have it all planned. They're going to paint me as an unstable, emotional wreck. He said he has the resources to prove it." "He does?" Evelyn said bluntly, steepling her fingers. "He'll hire the most expensive psychologists, the slimiest private investigators. They'll dig into every corner of your life. They'll say your unemployment proves you can't provide. They'll twist your grief into instability. We need to move faster and smarter." The first step was establishing Amelia's independence. She refused Ethan's corporate apartment instead, finding a small but clean one-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights, using the last of her own savings for the deposit. It was a world away from Central Park West. The sirens at night were louder. The air was thick with the smell of street food. But for the first time in years, it felt real. It felt like hers. The second step was reviving her career. She spent her days calling old contacts, dusting off her portfolio, fighting the exhaustion and morning sickness that were her constant companions. The rejections were polite, but firm. The world of architecture had moved on without her. She was seen as a socialite who had dabbled in a career before marrying well. Ethan's shadow was long, and his influence was pervasive. Doors that were once open were now quietly closed. The loneliness was a physical weight. Her society friends, whose allegiances were to power and status, had vanished. Her own parents, living a quiet life in Ohio, were supportive, but unable to comprehend the scale of the battle she was facing. The nights were the worst spent staring at the ceiling of her unfamiliar bedroom, one hand resting on her swelling belly, whispering promises to the tiny life within her. "I will not let him take you," she would murmur into the darkness. "I will protect you." Ethan and Chloe, meanwhile, were flaunting their new life. They were photographed at charity events, Chloe draped in diamonds and couture, looking every bit the triumphant successor. An article in a high society magazine featured them in their penthouse, speaking of their whirlwind romance and their excitement for the future. There was a single sanitized mention of Ethan's amicable separation. The article included a quote from Chloe. "I've always wanted to be a mother. I believe a child needs a stable two-parent home filled with love and positive energy, and that's what Ethan and I will provide." The words were a dagger in Amelia's heart. They weren't just erasing her, they were rewriting history, casting her as the obstacle to their perfect family. Evelyn fought back with legal filings and injunctions, but it was like trying to stop a tsunami with a bucket. Ethan's legal team was a behemoth, burying them in paperwork, filing motion after motion designed to drain Amelia's resources and her will to fight. One rainy afternoon, feeling particularly hopeless. After another door was shut in her face, Amelia sat in a small cafe near her apartment, nursing a cup of herbal tea. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number with a familiar area code. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. Amelia Sterling. The voice was deep calm and instantly recognizable, though she hadn't heard it in over a decade. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Julian Davenport." Amelia's breath hitched. Julian Davenport. The name echoed from her and Ethan's past. He had been Ethan's business partner, the brilliant co-founder of their first firm. They had been the golden boys of their generation until a bitter, acrimonious split left them as the fiercest of rivals. Julian had gone on to build an empire that dwarfed Ethan's, a quiet, formidable force in global finance. He was richer, more respected, and the one man Ethan truly feared. "Julian," she managed to say, her mind racing. "How did you get my number?" "I have my ways," he said, and she could almost hear a faint smile in his voice. "I read about your situation. I wanted to say, I'm sorry for what you're going through. Ethan can be a brute." "That's an understatement," she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. There was a pause. "I also called for another reason," he said, his tone shifting from personal to professional. "I'm heading a new philanthropic foundation. We're building a state-of-the-art children's wing for the city hospital. The project needs a lead architect with vision and integrity. Your name came to mind? I remember your university thesis on therapeutic design. It was brilliant." Amelia was stunned into silence. He remembered her thesis from 15 years ago. No one, not even Ethan, had ever mentioned it after graduation. I'm not sure I'm in a position to take on something so big right now," she stammered, thinking of her pregnancy, the legal battle. "On the contrary," Julian said, his voice firm but kind. "I think you're in the perfect position. You need to work. You need to build something again, for yourself and for your son. Let me send you the preliminary brief. No strings attached. Just look at it." Before she could protest further, he had wished her well and hung up. A few minutes later, a detailed email arrived. It was the project of a lifetime, a chance not just for a job, but for a resurrection. As she scrolled through the blueprints and mission statement, a single powerful thought cut through her despair. Julian Davenport wasn't just offering her a job, he was offering her a lifeline. And in a war against Ethan Vance, there was no more powerful ally she could possibly have. The game was about to change. The Davenport Tower was an elegant shard of steel and glass that pierced the Manhattan skyline, a monument to the quiet, unshakable power of its creator. Walking into the lobby felt like entering a different universe from the noisy streets of Brooklyn. The air was still, the silence punctuated only by the soft clicks of heels on Italian marble. It was a world of calm, controlled strength. It was Julian. Julian Davenport in person was even more formidable than she remembered. The boyish charm from their university days had matured into a commanding presence. He had kind eyes, but they missed nothing. He greeted her not with pity, but with respect, shaking her hand firmly and guiding her to a conference room with a view that rivaled Ethan's, though it felt less like a conquest and more like a vantage point. "The board was unanimous," he said, sliding a contract across the polished mahogany table. "The job is yours if you want it." Amelia looked at the salary and the resources allocated to the project. It was more than generous. It was a statement. It was enough to fund her legal battle for years to come. It was a suit of armor. "Why are you doing this, Julian?" she asked, her gaze steady. "This isn't just charity." He met her eyes without hesitation. "No, it's not. Firstly, you are the best person for this job. I've followed your early work. You have a gift. Ethan was a fool to let you sideline it. Secondly," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I have never respected the way Ethan does business or the way he treats people. I consider him a rival not just in the market, but in principle. What he is doing to you is unconscionable. If providing you with a platform to re-establish your independence and secure your child's future is a blow to him, then I consider that a bonus." His honesty was bracing. He wasn't pretending to be a saint. He was an adversary of Ethan's, and the enemy of his enemy was his friend. This was an alliance, clear and simple. Amelia signed the contract. Working on the children's wing became her salvation. She poured all her pain, fear, and fierce maternal love into the designs. She created spaces filled with light and color corridors that curved like gentle arms and patient rooms with windows angled to catch the morning sun. It was more than a building. It was a sanctuary, everything her home with Ethan had failed to be. She was no longer just the pregnant, abandoned wife. She was Amelia Sterling, the lead architect on the city's most prestigious philanthropic project. Julian was a constant, supportive presence. He was nothing like Ethan. Where Ethan demanded, Julian asked. Where Ethan pontificated, Julian listened. He would join her for late-night sessions at the office, not to supervise, but to learn, asking insightful questions about her design choices. He made sure the company cafeteria was stocked with her pregnancy-craving foods and that her schedule was flexible enough for her doctor's appointments. He treated her not as a damsel in distress, but as a valued colleague. Ethan was predictably enraged. He saw Julian's hiring of Amelia as a direct attack. The legal skirmishes intensified. His lawyers now painted her as a neglectful mother-to-be, working long hours for Ethan's sworn enemy, a man who was clearly manipulating her. Mr. Davenport is using Ms. Sterling as a pawn in his corporate war with my client. Ethan's lawyer, a pinstriped viper named Marcus Thorne, argued in a preliminary hearing. He has brainwashed her, creating a stressful environment that is undoubtedly harmful to the unborn child. Evelyn Reed countered with surgical precision. My client has been offered the professional opportunity of a lifetime, one that allows her to provide for her child, a child Mr. Vance has shown no interest in beyond a desire to possess him. The only stress in my client's life is being generated by the relentless, cruel, and baseless attacks from the plaintiff. As Amelia's due date approached, the pressure mounted. One evening, working late to finalize a schematic, a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. She gasped, dropping her pen. Julian, who had been reviewing budgets in his office, heard the sound and was by her side in an instant. "Amelia, what is it?" he asked, his usual calm replaced by alarm. "It's too early." She breathed another wave of pain, making her double over. "The baby's not due for another 6 weeks." Julian didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms, his strength surprising her, and carried her out of the building. His driver had the car waiting. In the back of the Maybach, racing through the city streets with a police escort Julian had somehow arranged with a single phone call. He held her hand, his voice a steady, reassuring presence in her sea of panic. "Just breathe, Amelia. We're almost there. You're not alone." And in that terrifying moment, she realized it was true. The man beside her, the man she once knew only as her husband's enemy, had become her anchor. At the hospital, the doctors managed to stop the premature labor, but she was ordered on immediate bed rest until the baby was born. The cause, the doctor explained, was extreme stress. Julian handled everything. He had her moved to the best private suite, contacted Evelyn, and stood guard like a sentinel, ensuring no one from Ethan's camp could get near her. Ethan showed up, of course, feigning concern for the cameras he had likely tipped off. "Amelia, darling," he said, striding into a room with a bouquet of funereal lilies, Chloe trailing behind him like a vulture. "We were so worried." Before Amelia could speak, Julian stepped forward, blocking their path. He was taller than Ethan, and in that moment he seemed to radiate a cold authority that made Ethan's bluster look cheap. "She needs to rest," Julian said, his voice quiet, but laced with steel. "Your presence here is not conducive to that. Leave." "You have no right to tell me what to do," Ethan sneered. "This is my wife and my child. Your wife whom you threw out, and your child whom you have caused to be in this very hospital bed." Julian retorted, his gaze unwavering. "You are not welcome here. If you don't leave in the next 10 seconds, I will have security remove you." Ethan, for once, seemed to recognize he was outmatched. He shot Julian a look of pure hatred, threw the flowers into a nearby trash can, and stormed out, Chloe scurrying after him. Lying in the sterile hospital bed, Amelia watched the exchange with a strange sense of clarity. The battle lines had been drawn long ago, but now the generals were facing each other directly. This was no longer just about her and Ethan. It was about Vance versus Davenport. And her child was the prize. Leo Sterling. Vance was born 3 weeks later, a small but healthy baby with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's determined eyes. The moment Amelia held him, the world outside the hospital room, the legal battles, the betrayal, the fear melted away, replaced by a love so fierce and absolute it took her breath away. He was perfect. He was hers. And she would burn the world to the ground to protect him. Julian was her first visitor, arriving not with fanfare, but with a simple, thoughtful gift, a lifetime subscription to a college fund in Leo's name. He looked at the baby nestled in Amelia's arms, with a gentle reverence that squeezed her heart. "He's beautiful, Amelia," he said softly. "You did an amazing job." Ethan's arrival was, by contrast, a calculated media event. He came with a lawyer and a court order granting him supervised visitation. He strode in, handed Amelia a document, and demanded to hold his son. The document was a formal petition for sole custody filed the day after Leo was born. The petition was a work of fiction, a masterpiece of character assassination. It painted Amelia as an emotionally volatile, career-obsessed woman who had endangered her child through a reckless association with Julian Davenport. It claimed she was an unfit mother. By contrast, it portrayed Ethan and Chloe as a stable, loving couple ready to provide a traditional family environment. "You can't be serious," Amelia whispered, clutching Leo tighter. "Perfectly serious," Ethan said, his eyes cold. "The courts will see that a boy needs his father. He needs the Vance name and the resources that come with it. You can be his weekend mother if you behave." The fight was no longer a distant threat. It was here in her hospital room, trying to pry her son from her arms. The following weeks were a living nightmare. Amelia was discharged into a world where she was constantly being watched. A private investigator hired by Ethan tailed her everywhere, documenting every trip to the grocery store, every visit from a friend. A court-appointed psychologist subjected her to hours of invasive questioning, her every answer twisted to fit a narrative of instability. Ethan used his visitation rights to harass her. He would show up with Chloe, who would coo over Leo and offer unsolicited, condescending parenting advice. He would criticize Amelia's small apartment, the brand of diapers she used, the way she held her own child. It was psychological warfare, designed to break her down before the trial even began. Through it all, Julian remained her steadfast ally. He respected her need for space with her newborn, but made his resources available. His own legal team worked in the background, feeding Evelyn information, digging into Ethan's finances and Chloe's past. He sent a private security detail to shadow Ethan's PI, ensuring Amelia's safety and documenting the harassment. One evening, after a particularly grueling deposition, where Ethan's lawyer had all but called her a gold digger, Amelia was sitting in her apartment, rocking a colicky Leo, feeling the walls close in. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and for the first time truly terrified she might lose. There was a knock on the door. It was Julian. He looked tired, his tie loosened, but his gaze was as resolute as ever. "May I come in?" he asked gently. She nodded, and he stepped inside his large frame, making the small living room seem even smaller. He didn't sit down. He just watched her for a moment, his expression a mixture of anger and compassion. "Evelyn told me what happened today," he said, his voice tight. "They're trying to bury you, to brand you. In family court, perception is reality. A single working mother, however brilliant and capable, against a powerful married man with unlimited funds. The odds are not in our favor. It's not fair, but it's the truth. "So, what do I do, Julian?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "What else can I do?" He took a deep breath, and what he said next would alter the course of all their lives. "We change the perception," he said, his voice low and serious. "We change the entire equation. Ethan wants to argue that he can provide a stable two-parent home, so we give them one they can't possibly compete with." Amelia stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" He finally met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze was staggering. "Amelia, marry me." She was so shocked she almost dropped the baby. "What, Julian? That's insane. You can't be serious." "I have never been more serious in my life," he insisted, stepping closer. "Think about it not as a romance, but as a strategic merger, a partnership. As my wife, you are no longer a struggling single mother. You are Mrs. Amelia Davenport. Your resources become my resources, which are without arrogance effectively unlimited. My home becomes your home. My legal team becomes your legal team." He knelt down, not in a romantic gesture, but to be at eye level with her and her son. "Ethan is fighting you with the image of a powerful, wealthy family. We will present the court with an image of a family so powerful, so stable, and so devoted to Leo's well-being that Ethan's entire case crumbles into dust. He wants to play a game of power. We will show him what real power looks like. It won't be a marriage of love, Amelia. It will be a marriage of protection, a fortress for you and for Leo." She looked from Julian's deadly serious face to the sleeping baby in her arms. It was a crazy, unthinkable, audacious plan. It was a lie, a performance for a judge. But it was also a lifeline, a battering ram against the prison Ethan was building around her. He was offering her the one thing Ethan had used against her unassailable strength. "This is not a proposal of the heart," Julian continued, as if reading her mind. "There are no romantic expectations. It is an alliance. You would be free to live your life. Our only shared goal would be to ensure Leo is safe with his mother. When the custody is secured and you feel safe, we can quietly dissolve it. No one ever has to know." Amelia looked at her son, his tiny chest rising and falling, his face a perfect picture of innocence. For him, she would do anything. She would walk through fire. She would make a deal with the devil, or in this case, her husband's richest rival. Her decision was made. "Okay, Julian," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'll marry you." The wedding was a quiet, discreet affair at City Hall, a world away from the lavish ceremony where she had pledged her life to Ethan. The only attendees were Evelyn Reed and Julian's most trusted lawyer, who served as witnesses. Amelia wore a simple cream-colored dress, and Julian a perfectly tailored navy suit. They exchanged simple, legally binding vows, their hands cool and steady as they slid plain platinum bands onto each other's fingers. There was no kiss, just a firm, decisive handshake sealing their pact. Amelia Sterling was now Amelia Davenport. The news hit the financial and social circles of New York like a thunderclap. Paparazzi swarmed outside her Brooklyn apartment, so Julian's security swiftly moved her and Leo into his vast, elegant duplex on Park Avenue. It was even grander than the penthouse she'd shared with Ethan, but it felt different. It was a home filled with books and art that reflected a life of substance, not just of acquisition. Julian gave her an entire wing of the duplex, complete with a nursery that his staff had prepared overnight, ensuring she had privacy and space. The marriage filing landed on Marcus Thorne's desk with the force of an explosion. Ethan's reaction, as recounted by Evelyn, was apoplectic. He had been outmaneuvered in the most public and humiliating way possible. He had tried to frame Amelia as a desperate, unstable single mother, and overnight she had become the wife of his most hated nemesis, a man whose wealth and influence dwarfed his own. The legal strategy shifted instantly. "This is a sham," Ethan screamed at Evelyn during a heated phone call. "A pathetic, transparent fraud, and I will prove it." Ethan's team doubled down, filing motions to have the marriage annulled, claiming it was a conspiracy to defraud the court. They hired more investigators to watch Amelia and Julian, desperate to find proof that their marriage was anything but real. But Julian was always one step ahead. He and Amelia began to construct a careful, believable public narrative. They were photographed at quiet dinners, Julian's hand resting gently on the small of her back. They attended a charity function for the children's hospital, Amelia on his arm, looking poised and confident. They didn't feign a passionate romance. Instead, they projected an image of quiet dignity, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to Leo. It was a performance, but it was a masterful one, grounded in the genuine respect that had grown between them. The war room was Julian's library, a vast two-story space lined with mahogany shelves. Here, Amelia, Julian, Evelyn, and Julian's formidable legal team would meet, poring over strategy. Julian brought the same ruthless efficiency to this fight that he brought to a corporate takeover. "Ethan's case rests on 3 pillars," Julian said one night, standing before a large whiteboard. "First, his financial superiority. Second, the stability of his 2-parent household with Chloe. Third, his ability to paint Amelia as emotionally unfit. We have to systematically destroy all 3. The first pillar was the easiest to demolish. Julian's forensic accountants had been digging into Ethan's company for months. They uncovered a pattern of high-risk, borderline unethical trades and leveraged debt that made his firm look far more vulnerable than its public image suggested. He wasn't just wealthy. He was reckless. The second pillar, the stable home with Chloe, was a more delicate target. Julian's investigators, far more discreet and effective than Ethan's thugs, compiled a dossier on Chloe Decker. It revealed a history of calculated relationships with powerful men and a mountain of debt from a lifestyle she couldn't afford. More damningly, they found evidence that she was still actively seeking out other wealthy suitors, seeing Ethan not as a life partner, but as a stepping stone that wasn't proving as sturdy as she'd hoped. The third pillar was the most important. To counter the unfit mother narrative, they compiled their own evidence. They had nanny cam footage of Ethan's awkward, disinterested interactions with Leo during his visits. They had recordings of his threatening voicemails. They had testimony from the doorman at Amelia's old building about his verbal abuse. But Julian knew they needed more. They needed a silver bullet. "The court needs to see who Ethan really is when he thinks no one is watching," Julian stated. "His arrogance is his weakness. We need to bait him." The plan they devised was risky. They had one of Julian's business contacts, a hedge fund manager from London, approach Ethan with a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity, a deal that seemed too good to be true, promising astronomical returns. It was designed to appeal to Ethan's greed and his increasing desperation as Julian's legal and financial pressure mounted. The meetings would be held at a private club known for its lax security, and the London manager would be wearing a wire. As the court date loomed, the tension in the Park Avenue duplex was palpable. Amelia and Julian fell into a surprisingly comfortable domestic rhythm. He would often come home to find her on the floor of the nursery sketching in a notebook, while Leo cooed in his bouncer. He'd sit with her not talking about the case, but about her designs, about books, about the world. In these quiet moments, the lines between their strategic alliance and a genuine friendship began to blur. Amelia found herself admiring his integrity and his fierce loyalty. Julian, in turn, was in awe of her resilience and the depth of her love for her son. One night, Leo was crying inconsolably. Amelia had walked him, fed him, changed him, but nothing worked. She was at her wit's end when Julian appeared in the doorway. "Let me try," he offered softly. He took the wailing infant from her, holding him securely against his shoulder, and began to hum a low, rumbling tune. He walked the length of the long hallway, his steps even and steady. Within minutes, Leo's cries subsided, and he was fast asleep. Amelia watched them, her heart aching with a confusing mix of gratitude and something more. This man who had entered her life as a weapon had become her partner in the truest sense of the word. Their marriage might have been a legal fiction, but the protection and care he offered her and her son were profoundly real. And the thought that it was all temporary, that he would one day walk away after the battle was won, left a small, cold knot in the pit of her stomach. The courtroom was a theater of quiet hostility. On one side sat Ethan Vance, flanked by Chloe Decker, who was dressed in a demure pearl gray suit, the picture of sober respectability. Ethan's face was a mask of confident arrogance, but Amelia could see the frantic, cornered look in his eyes. On the other side sat Amelia with Julian beside her. He wasn't just an ally in the gallery. As her husband, he sat at the table with her and Evelyn, a silent, immovable mountain of support. The judge assigned to the case was a woman named Eleanor Thompson, a veteran of the family court system known for her sharp intellect and her utter intolerance for theatrics. She peered over her spectacles, her gaze sweeping across the two parties, and Amelia felt a flicker of hope. This was a woman who would not be easily fooled by wealth or charm. Ethan's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, opened with an attack on the marriage. "Your Honor, we are here today because of a desperate, cynical ploy. A marriage of convenience, a fraudulent contract designed to mislead this court. It is a testament to Ms. Sterling Davenport's, or whatever she calls herself this week, moral bankruptcy." Evelyn Reed stood up, calm and collected. "Your Honor, my client entered into a legal binding marriage with a man who has shown her and her child more kindness and support in a few months than the plaintiff showed her in 5 years. If Mr. Vance finds this marriage inconvenient, it is only because it has inconvenienced his plan to financially and emotionally cripple the mother of his child." The first few days were a brutal assault on Amelia's character. Thorne called witnesses former friends a disgruntled housekeeper who painted her as a cold social climbing woman who was never interested in motherhood until it became a financial tool. It was a tapestry of lies and half-truths, and with each one, Amelia felt a piece of herself being stripped away. Julian's hand would find hers under the table, his steady grip a silent reminder. This is their strategy. Do not let them break you. When Amelia took the stand, Thorne was merciless. "You went from your husband's home directly into the arms and home of his greatest business rival, isn't that correct?" "I accepted a job from an old acquaintance who believed in my talent," Amelia replied, her voice steady. "A job or an inducement, a down payment for your testimony against your former husband." "Objection," Evelyn snapped. "Counsel is testifying." "Sustained," Judge Thompson said, her eyes narrowed at Thorne. "Tread carefully, Mr. Thorne." Thorne shifted his attack. Isn't it true that you put your career and your new relationship above the needs of your newborn, even causing yourself to go into premature labor due to the stress of your demanding new job? Amelia looked directly at the judge. The only stress that endangered my child was the constant harassment and threats from my ex-husband. Mr. Davenport saved my life and my son's life by getting me to the hospital. He has done nothing but provide a safe and stable environment for us ever since. Then came the turning point. Evelyn Reed called her first witness the hedge fund manager from London. He recounted his meetings with Ethan. Then Evelyn played the audio recordings from the wire. The courtroom was silent as Ethan's voice filled the space, arrogant, boastful, and utterly damning. "The kid," Ethan's voice said with a dismissive laugh. "He's a legacy asset. My name, my bloodline. I can't have him raised by some washed-up architect and my sanctimonious prick of a rival. It's about appearances, my friend. Control. As for the mother, she'll be taken care of. Once I have the boy, she's irrelevant." There was another clip, even more chilling. Chloe. She plays her part. She understands the value of the Vance brand. Is she mother material? Who cares? We'll have a team of the best nannies money can buy. The boy won't want for anything. This is a business transaction and I will not lose. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Chloe Decker's face went pale. Ethan looked as if he had been physically struck. His eyes darting towards Judge Thompson, whose expression was now carved from ice. Evelyn wasn't done. She submitted the forensic accountant's report detailing the precarious state of Ethan's firm. She presented the file on Chloe, including text messages where she complained about having to play mommy, and inquired about the net worth of a recently divorced tech billionaire. The final witness was Julian. He took the stand, his presence commanding the room. Thorne tried to paint him as a vindictive puppet master. "Mr. Davenport, you orchestrated this entire affair, didn't you? You saw a woman in a vulnerable position and used her and her child as a weapon against a man you've hated for years." Julian looked not at Thorne, but at the judge. "I saw a brilliant woman being systematically destroyed by a cruel and narcissistic man. I saw a child who was being treated as a bargaining chip. I offered them safety. My marriage to Amelia is a partnership, yes. It is a partnership built on a foundation of profound respect and a shared devotion to protecting a child. I love Leo as if he were my own son. If that is a crime, I am guilty. What Ethan Vance has done, however, in using his own child as a pawn in a game of ego, that your honor is a moral crime of the highest order." His words hung in the air, simple, direct, and devastatingly sincere. Finally, Judge Thompson spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. "Mr. Vance, do you have anything to say in your own defense?" Ethan stood sputtering, a desperate man watching his world burn down. "This is a setup, a conspiracy. They twisted my words." Judge Thompson simply stared at him, her expression one of utter disdain. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. You may sit. I have heard enough. I will deliver my ruling tomorrow morning at 10. The air in the courtroom the next morning was thick with a final unbearable tension. Amelia sat between Julian and Evelyn, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She hadn't slept. Across the aisle, Ethan sat alone. Chloe Decker was gone. The moment the previous day's session had ended, she had walked out of the courtroom without a backward glance and disappeared from his life. He looked smaller, diminished, the swagger gone, replaced by a pallid, desperate fear. Judge Thompson entered and took her seat, her face grim. She wasted no time on pleasantries. She looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice ringing with judicial authority. "In my 15 years on this bench, I have seen a great deal of conflict. I have seen anger, grief, and bitterness, but rarely have I witnessed a case so profoundly poisoned by one party's malignant narcissism ego and breathtaking cruelty. Ethan flinched as if he'd been slapped. You have used your considerable resources not to co-parent but to terrorize. You have treated your own infant son not as a child to be loved, but as a legacy asset, a prize to be won. You have lied, you have manipulated, and you have shown a callous disregard for the well-being of the very child you claim to want to protect. Your conduct has been, to put it mildly, monstrous. The judge paused, letting the weight of her words settle. She then turned her gaze to Amelia. "Ms. Davenport," she said, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. "You have endured a trial by fire. You have been subjected to a campaign of humiliation and intimidation that would have broken most people. Yet you have conducted yourself with unwavering grace, courage, and a fierce, palpable love for your son. You sought to protect him not as a possession, but as a human life entrusted to your care." The judge picked up her gavel. "Therefore, the court's decision is as follows. The petition for sole custody by the plaintiff, Mr. Ethan Vance, is denied. The request to annul the marriage of Mr. and Mrs. Davenport is denied. The court grants sole legal and physical custody of the minor child, Leo Sterling Vance, to his mother, Amelia Davenport." A sob of pure, unadulterated relief escaped Amelia's lips. Julian's arm wrapped around her, holding her steady. But the judge wasn't finished. She looked back at Ethan, her eyes like flint. "Furthermore, Mr. Vance, your visitation rights are hereby suspended, pending a comprehensive psychological evaluation and court-mandated anger management and parenting courses. Any future visitation will be, for the foreseeable future, strictly supervised. You are also ordered to pay Ms. Davenport's legal fees in their entirety. Finally, a restraining order is issued. You are to remain at least 500 yards from Ms. Davenport and the child at all times outside of pre-arranged supervised visits." She banged the gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot, signaling the end of the war. Ethan Vance sat stunned, his face ashen. He had lost everything. His son, his mistress, his reputation, and as the financial reports Julian's team had leaked to the press would soon ensure his company. He was ruined completely and utterly. He had chosen his mistress over his pregnant wife, and in the end, the judge had handed his son's future to his richest rival. Weeks later, a life in the Park Avenue duplex had found a new, peaceful rhythm. The legal battle was over, the threat of Ethan gone. One evening, Amelia found Julian in the library, staring out at the glittering city lights. "The agreement was that we would dissolve this after the trial," Amelia said softly, her heart pounding. Julian turned to face her. The look in his eyes was not that of a business partner at the end of a successful merger. It was something deeper, something she had been afraid to name. "The agreement was a means to an end, Amelia," he said, his voice quiet. "The end was to protect you and Leo. But along the way, this has stopped feeling like an agreement to me. This has started to feel like a family." He took a step closer, his gaze searching hers. "I know this was not a proposal of the heart, but my heart is in it now, Amelia. Completely. What started as a strategy has become my truth. I love you, and I love our son." He said, "Our son." Tears streamed down Amelia's face, not of sorrow or relief, but of a profound, unexpected joy. The fortress they had built to protect her son had become a home. The man who had been her shield had become her partner in every way that mattered. "This started as a lie to a judge," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I think it's the truest thing in my life." He closed the distance between them, and when he kissed her, it wasn't a handshake or a pact. It was a promise. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one not built on a perfect facade, but on the rubble of a broken past forged in loyalty, respect, and a love that had risen from the ashes stronger and more real than anything either of them had ever known before. The story of Amelia, Ethan, and Julian is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't measured in stock portfolios or penthouse views, but in integrity, loyalty, and love. It's a story about the incredible resilience of a mother, the shocking consequences of betrayal, and the unexpected places we can find our true allies. Ethan Vance learned the hard way that character is destiny, and his lack of it led to his ultimate downfall. Amelia, on the other hand, found that by fighting for her son, she ended up rebuilding her own life into something more beautiful and authentic than she could have ever imagined. What would you have done in Amelia's position? Could you have made such a bold and risky alliance to protect your child? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of karmic justice and a mother's unshakable strength moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear a story of hope and resilience, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true-to-life dramas that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a single story. Thank you for watching.